Welcome back to Spill the Soup, the podcast that gives you insight into the life of today's teenage and college world. I'm your host, Marley Comito, and this week we're going to be talking about the what feels like never-ending global pandemic, but more specifically, what COVID on campus looks like. Today, I am joined by two wonderful guests, one of which who has been on this podcast last season and is a great friend of mine from home, Jessica Paul, and the other is one of my new, yet already closest friends who I've met here at school through our sorority so far, Lily Solomon. I want to welcome you both to the show. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, we can start off by having you guys introduce yourselves to familiarize with everybody else listening and for some general background information. The three of us are all freshmen here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, but you guys can go ahead and say your name, where you're from, what your major or your intended major is, and where you're living on campus this year. Who would like to start?
My name is Jessica. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I currently live in Celery Residence Hall here. And same as Marley, and I am majoring in psychology.
Amazing.
Hi, I'm Lily Solomon. I'm from Bluebell, Pennsylvania. My major, I'm debating between two, but right now I'm in communication sciences and disorders. And what else? What was the last thing I had to say? Oh, I live in Statesider.
What is Statesider?
Oh, goodness. Statesider is off-campus housing. It's very unique, very interesting.
It's an apartment.
A fun experience.
So it's not like a dorm like what Jessica and I live in. And the thing about Statesider is like it's just a known thing that all freshmen live there, right? Is there anybody that lives there that's not a freshman right now?
No, it's completely freshmen, which was what I liked about it because my family was scared of COVID and they thought if dorms get shut down, they wanted me to live in an apartment and they knew this was a freshman apartment. So that was why I chose to live here.
We're going to get totally into that. Don't worry.
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, with that being out of the way, we can get started with our first topic. So, as much as I love both Jess and Lily, I knew you guys would be great guests on the show for like any particular episode this season. I asked you both to come on today because you both have fairly recently contracted COVID at school in the last few months or so. So, like, even though the three of us are all up to date on our vaccinations, we wear our masks in class or in public, and we're following proper guidelines like made by the school, the odds were not necessarily in your guys' favor once the Omicron variant hit Wisconsin. For Jess, I know that was like the week before winter break in mid to late December during first semester final exams. Mm-hmm. And for Lily, this happened to me just a few weeks ago. I actually had COVID myself along like with my family over winter break. We all ended up testing positive around the same time during the first week of January. Great way to start 2022. But fortunately, we were able to quarantine safely and be together. So it all worked out. But I wanted to open up the conversation to you guys to hear what your experiences were like from the moment you began feeling symptoms to taking a test and beginning your quarantine, all that stuff. But like Jess, I know being from Minnesota, and by this I mean not being too far from home once you're at school, this may have played an influence to your experience, along with the fact that we both live in a dorm, a residence hall. So the university has a really big role in determining our quarantine experiences once they find out about a positive test. But Lily, being from outside of Philly in Pennsylvania, going home once you test positive isn't really an option. So choosing to live in off-campus housing, like you just mentioned, was a huge influence on that. But what was your quarantine experience like? If you want to talk about, again, how COVID played an influence into you choosing to live in off-campus housing, totally touch on that. So we can start with you, and then Jess, you can totally take over after.
So, although I live in off-campus housing, I do have a roommate and two suite mates. So if I get COVID, I have a chance of giving it to all three of them. And something that I was not really willing to do is to go onto like campus quarantining where you like, I don't really know how it works, but I don't really want to be like with another person in a room while we both are suffering with COVID. Mm-hmm. So I got COVID. It was like the second week of second semester. And I can remember the exact time when I felt it coming on. It was 2:00 in the afternoon. It was like all of a sudden, I was completely fine. I was doing homework. And then all of a sudden, I started like getting the shivers and I needed to like lay down and take a nap. And I remember that was very weird because I haven't taken a nap during the day in few months, so it wasn't very much like me. And I woke up from my nap completely shivering, but also sweating head to toe. And I just called my parents and I said, I don't know what to do. I feel disgusting. I've never felt this way before. I took my temperature. I'm like 102
Ooh.
degrees. And yeah, it was so rough. And then they were like, call Pivotal Health, which
Oh,
is
wait, we got
I
to give them some free
the
promo right now. I
yes, of
love
Pivotal
course.
Pivotal
Health is
Health. Jess, you
amazing.
use them? Okay, basically,
Yeah, that's what I did when I got COVID
oh my
too.
God, gorgeous. It's probably like the best thing since sliced bread. Like greatest invention, greatest thing ever. It's like on-call medical. They come to you. They bring the doctor to you. People show up at your door. You make a little appointment online or you call their number. And then 30 minutes later or so, doctors show up with like tests. They can do your blood work. They can like, they tested me for flu, for COVID. Like they can do literally anything all in your room, wherever you live on campus. It's beautiful. Sorry, keep going.
It's so quick and
Yes.
nice.
No, it was amazing, but because I was so disgusting, it was one of those times where I just did not want to talk to anyone.
Even a
You know,
doctor.
when you're just even the doctor, I was like,
Get away.
no one come near me. I just need to be by myself. And so my family was like, well, at least take a COVID test. And I was like, okay, because I had one in my room. So I took it, I waited, it's negative. So I'm like, okay, I don't have COVID. It's just a really big sickness. I don't know what's happening. And so they're like, okay, since it's negative, you can sleep in your room. Just call Pivotal Health in the morning. And I like my test, like I was just kind of worried about it. So I took a second test that night, and the second one was also negative. So I had 2 negative tests
Interesting.
that
I did
day.
not know that.
Then yes. And so then that I took the second test probably around 9 o'clock at night. The next morning at like 10 o'clock, Pivotal Health came.
Ooh.
And so this is only like how many hours later? Like
Less than a day.
I don't know. It's the next
We're not
morning.
math majors.
And
Keep going.
no, we are not.
Keep going.
and so they tested me. I came up positive. They also tested me for strep and flu, and I was negative for both, but my tonsils were so enlarged
Ooh.
that they were concerned it wasn't COVID because it was so bad. And so they thought I had mono as well, but I couldn't get tested for that because it was too early. So yeah, so I immediately called my parents and we tried booking a hotel because you only have to quarantine for 5 days with Omicron. And so this has already been the second day technically. And so I stayed there from like Monday afternoon to Friday morning.
All by yourself.
All by myself. I couldn't leave my room. I left my room a total of 2 times.
You're in the hotel for 4 days. What was it like being alone? Were you DoorDash's #1 fan? Were you actually really ill and couldn't do anything? Talk about the quarantine, and then we'll move on to Jess.
Yeah, so I actually, like, I just was not hungry when I was in quarantine because of the sickness. I don't know what was happening, and I'm always hungry, so that's a concerning thing when I wasn't. And so I still had to eat. So I did a lot of room service, and that was like I had that probably like twice a day. And then like one time Marley, she brought me some
Woo, friend of the
food.
year.
Yes. And then I had food delivered like 2 or 3 times, but
Did you
I
like
like it
quarantining
was
in a
so
hotel?
exhausting.
That's a good one.
I did
Some nice alone
actually.
time.
I thought it was a little scary being alone just because I had previously fainted. And like if I was by myself, that can be a concerning thing.
Totally.
So like whenever I had to shower, whenever I had to like leave the room or do really anything, my mom had to FaceTime me just to like have her comfort knowing that like
She's on the phone.
she knows that something's happening. She can call someone, and I had to leave my door unlocked
Wow.
because my mom was scared. Like even though it's kind of scary having your room unlocked, like that was what my mom thought was going to be best for me, which I agree.
Okay.
And yeah. And what else happened? I don't know. The first 3 nights, it was awful. I couldn't do anything. I could barely even watch a show without like getting chills or something, or my fever would spike every few hours. But then the 4th day I woke up completely fine. And I just felt good as new. I could do whatever. And the 5th day, I got to go home, and I was a little out of breath, but I figured out that was because I hadn't moved in 4 days. So that went away quickly once I started moving around. But it was a very interesting experience.
Okay.
Not my favorite. It was pretty awful.
All right.
But
thank you for sharing.
yes.
All right, Jess, what happened to
Thank
you?
you.
Tell us.
All right. Well, so I got COVID it was the Friday right before finals week. So it was like December 17th, maybe. And I was pretty sick for like 2-3 days before that. I think it was around like Wednesday that I remember waking up like crying. My throat was in so much pain. I like called my mom crying. I was like, I don't know what to do. And she was like, maybe you should take a COVID test. And like, gonna be honest, I was a little ignorant. I was like, no, it's not COVID. Like, I have a head cold. I know what it feels like. Because I do usually get head colds like every year. So I was like, okay, like this is a head cold. My throat hurts like normally it does with that. Like, whatever. So I go about my normal life for a few days. I saw Marley. I saw a few people, great. And then Friday afternoon, I had some friends who were like, honestly, like, we don't want to hang out with you until you get a COVID test. And I was like pretty offended by that because for some reason, like, even though so many people like have gotten COVID, it feels like offensive when someone like accuses you of having it.
Yes.
It's like, I don't know,
like
it was like a
touch.
personal attack. Yes, it's like, oh my God, you have COVID. And so Marley's roommate very nicely gave me her rapid COVID test. So I went to my room. My roommate's like in my room with me. I'm doing the nose thing. And it makes you feel like a little scientist doing that. Like doing your own at-home test. I've never done one before. It was really cool.
Pre-med.
And the first one, it came back positive within like 5 minutes. So I look at my roommate. I was like, no way this is real. So then I took a second test right away because I was like, I want to make sure it's right. So then I take another one. I'm on FaceTime with my mom. That one comes back positive too. And I was like, okay, like I actually have COVID. So my roommate just left. I'm on the phone with my mom, and I right away had to like figure out where to go because I didn't want to stay in the room that night, obviously, because like I felt terrible. I didn't want to give her COVID if she didn't already have it. And so I called UW Health. And the one thing I learned is that like if you don't test through UW Health, it's really hard for them to give you somewhere to go. Because like they kept telling me that there's like blank space between you saying you have COVID and them like knowing that it's real because you didn't test through them. So like it was so hard to be like, I have COVID, like I need somewhere to stay. So obviously like if they weren't gonna give me somewhere to stay, my mom was just gonna get me a hotel for the night. But ideally, like I didn't want to do that. And so I was planning to stay at school for another week at that point because I had finals, I had a ton of stuff going on. And I wasn't planning to miss it, but obviously I needed to go home. So my mom, amazing woman she is, she decided in the morning she was going to drive from Minneapolis and come pick me up from school and take me home to quarantine in my basement. But so for that night, UW Housing gave me a quarantine room in the residence hall across the street from mine, which was like so nice because I packed up all my stuff. I brought about 7 bags of clothes full home. I took like a big move-in cart. Here's me like with COVID. I DoorDash food to like the COVID room. And I'm like running down the street with like my move-in cart, like going to my COVID room for the night. And it was like so funny. The room was like, it felt like a hospital room. It was actually so scary, like being in there. It was like, and the worst part, some girl with COVID slept in there the night before.
Ugh.
And they didn't clean it before me getting there.
Gross.
So like there was 2 beds in this room, and the bed she slept in was still like unmade, dirty, infected from like her being there. And then I had to sleep in like the bed next to it.
Ugh.
Like Lily, you're so lucky you did not go to UW like quarantining.
That's what I was scared of.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. And like I don't know, the whole thing I just tried to like not do as much as possible. That night also though, I did have Pivotal Health come. So kind of what Lily was talking about, like I called Pivotal Health because like I said, I only took 2 at-home rapid tests that both were positive, but I didn't really trust it. So I had Pivotal Health come to kind of like, they gave me a 3rd rapid and that one was positive too. So then I was like, okay, like I definitely have COVID. But yeah, so I slept the night in UW quarantine housing. my mom was in Madison bright and early the next morning at like 10, and she rented like a minivan because it was just like bigger than the car we had at home. So I sat in like the way back row. She sat in the front driver's seat. We both wore N95 masks. When we stopped to get food, we like ate with the windows open. Like it was so funny. And I bet people thought we looked hilarious, like driving 4 hours with masks on our face. And then I made it home and I spent 10 days in my basement. Actually, no, at that point it was maybe like 8 days in my basement because they count it from like when your symptoms start.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm really thankful though that I was able to go home because it was really nice to like have home cooked food and I got to see my dogs. I know people say like you're not supposed to be around pets with COVID, but I convinced my family to let them like sneak down for a few minutes every day.
It's puppy therapy.
But yeah, I think I only went outside like twice that whole week, which it was a long week. I thought I was gonna go crazy, but honestly, it goes really quickly. Like when you're in quarantine, I don't know if you felt like that, Lily, but being in quarantine, Marley, I guess too, like being in quarantine, it goes by really quick. Like I watched a lot of
It
movies
does.
and everything. So yeah, that was my experience.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, both of you. Well, to shift gears a little bit into thinking more big picture about the topic of COVID on our college campus, I wanted us to sort of consider and discuss how we felt UW-Madison as a whole in terms of administration, professors, faculty, support resources, healthcare, all that stuff in comparison to other university campuses across the country have been handling and managing this pandemic. So I've really heard people say it all, like it's being poorly handled, professionally handled, complicatedly handled, all that stuff. But coming from two people that actually have had COVID on this campus, I guess this question is pretty applicable to both of you. But I was curious to know whether or not you felt your professors were supportive during each of your quarantines and isolation periods, and what missing classes, or in Jess's case, exams looked like, and how you felt that could have potentially been differently handled.
Yeah, so for me, it was really just finals that were impacted, which is a pretty big thing. I luckily had already taken one final like before I tested positive, but I still had three more to take that following week. One of them, the professor like without obviously me messaging them, said the final was going to be offered online, which was really nice. So I didn't have to worry about that. And then the other two, I had to like email and be like, I have COVID, I'm going home. Like, what do I do? And my philosophy professor also said it was going to be online, which was so nice because like online open notes makes, in a sense, like COVID getting really bad during finals week was kind of a blessing because like it made finals a little bit easier. The only one that was really hard and that I was a little upset with my professors was my math exam because they were like, you can't take it online. You have to take an incomplete in the class. And I was scheduled to retake my exam on January 25th when we came back.
Oh.
So that one sucked because I was like, it's not my fault I got COVID during finals week. And it was just really unfortunate that like I had that hanging over my head all of break. But I took it now and I got the credit, so it's okay. But that was kind of my experience overall.
Yeah, mine was a lot easier, luckily, just because it was only the second week of school. So as much as like there is schoolwork, it's not as deep into the semester where like you have to worry about missing 5 days of classes. But only all of my classes except for one were very accepting and said that there was no problem at all. They were able to send me like the slide notes and lecture recordings if they had. But one of my classes doesn't let us take notes. Marley and I are actually in the same class.
Whoa.
They don't send you slide notes, and if you miss a class, they have to expect you to have a friend in the class. And my discussion teacher doesn't know that I know Marley. And so I said, can I have like the lecture slides just so I can write down some notes from it? And he said, you have to make a friend in the class and have them send it to you. So I had to go up to this random person and ask them for notes. And luckily they were very nice about it and sent it to me.
Discussion.
But I couldn't read their handwriting.
We're in the class.
Yes.
We have different like discussion sections. That's like a smaller portion of the class.
Like they sent me the notes and I couldn't read them. So I ended up having to still ask Marley to send it to me. But like that was the only class that was really frustrating because they, even with COVID and like the for like the week and a half into school, like they expect me to have like friends in the class. It wasn't realistic, so I was a little annoyed by that. But all my other classes were very nice about it. I was able to miss all the discussions and do everything. Sorry, did you hear that? Sorry, I have roommates, guys.
All good. I'm dead.
I do want to say one more thing on top of like how universities handling COVID is I do think that they should have made some type of like graphic or something that's literally step by step. If you get COVID, this is what to do. Cause like I know when I tested positive, I was so lost. I was like scrambling to find numbers. I was trying to text like friends who had already had COVID, being like, "What did you do?"
Mm-hmm.
And there was just no clear instructions. And then everyone you call is like, "Oh, you should call this person, or can you hold?" And I'm just like, I have COVID, like I need to know what to do.
Yeah.
So I think that's just like one also error that they kind of made, but
Yeah.
No, I agree. But also, like UHS, they recommend Pivotal Health. And so, like, I guess when Pivotal Health took my positive test, they sent it into like a Wisconsin thing. And someone called me from the state of Wisconsin and gave me step-by-step instruction of what to do.
Me too, yeah.
That was really nice, but that wasn't through the school. So I agree with you. That was the little like I'm not really a on-campus student, so it's a little different for me. But it was nice having those instructions from someone, and they called me within the hour I got positive, which was really
Oh, wow.
impressive by them. Yeah, they were very on top of it.
Okay.
I think mine was like the day after, and I was like, he was giving me all these quarantine instructions, and I was like, "Yep, I'm already in my basement, like 4 hours away from campus." Like,
Not even in
he was like,
Wisconsin.
"Don't go into any university buildings," and I was like, "Nope, like I'm not coming back for a while." So
Well, I know that all of us have like dozens of friends our age at a wide variety of other colleges across the country. So I was wondering how you guys have heard COVID being handled everywhere else too. If you know if it's like similar to here or different, just some things that you've heard going on in other parts of the country. I know at smaller universities or more private ones like Tulane, Miami, stuff like that, when COVID and Omicron was getting really bad, sort of like right before first semester ended, a lot of their final exams or just classes and everything was moved to virtual or online or hybrid or whatever you want to call it. And all of their exams were online, like regardless. So a lot of kids went home early and stuff like that. But another big thing was online rush. We didn't really touch on that, but that, like COVID definitely had an influence on Greek life and stuff like that. For us, we only had round one of rush online, but for schools that do spring rush, when Omicron was getting bad, they had to do, I think, the majority of rush online. So that definitely looks like a different experience. But I was just wondering if you've heard of quarantine being different or how the university has handled everything in regards to COVID.
My friends have actually gotten pretty lucky with COVID. None of them have gotten it during their time at school. One of my friends got it at home, but like not at school. I do know one of my friends at University of Florida, their school, I don't know if it's just her, but I believe it's their school is mostly online right
Oh,
now.
wow.
So she only has 1 day of classes in person and the rest of the week are online. And I believe that's
wow.
similar to all of UF. So that's what they're doing, which I was kind of surprised at. I don't know if I can say
No,
this
yeah,
about UF,
Florida of
but
all
like
places.
the state of Florida, I'm surprised that they're doing the online, because I know she always jokes about how they're never wearing
Yeah.
masks. Like in their classes are like in Wisconsin, we have to wear masks for every single class and discussion. It's very strict, and I feel very safe with
Mhm.
it. But in UF, and I'm sure Miami as well, they don't wear masks to class unless their teacher asks them to, and they don't have to do it in any of the buildings or anything. It's very different. So I think that's very interesting to see those two aspects.
That goes into what I was going to bring up
I
next.
think,
But Jess, I want to hear if you know about other schools too.
yeah. I mean, I don't really know like a lot of the specifics. I feel like just since like COVID's been going on for so long, especially like our friends, like since we started college this year. It's a lot laid back everywhere compared to it used to, but I think a lot of other schools are much better about like testing everyone than like here it's only if you're not vaccinated, which I think maybe this fall when COVID was pretty bad, like it could have helped eliminate it quicker. But besides that, I don't know. I kind of feel like a lot of schools are kind of, which is nice for us in a sense, like kind of moving on as normal, but
Yeah.
it's just taking a
I
while.
forgot about that. Yeah, Wisconsin never mandated vaccines, but I think it's like 90 or 95% of all students and faculty are vaccinated, so they didn't really feel like it was necessary to. But private universities, or even I remember like the University of Michigan, if you were going to live in the residence dorms, you had to like show proof of vaccination, which I think is good. I
Yeah.
know it's controversial, but at this point in time, it's kind of like, come on. But Lily, you touched on this, and I was going to bring it up as one final thing. That just this last week, UW-Madison announced that it'll be lifting our mask mandate policy March 12th, meaning that by the time that everybody returns back to campus the following week after being away for spring break, and likely either nationally or internationally traveling, there will no longer be a requirement for mask wearing in like 300-person plus lectures, walking into residence buildings, restaurants on campus, all that. So I wanted to know what you guys thought of this, if it seems pointless or beneficial to still be wearing masks at that point in lecture halls and public settings at this point in the pandemic on campus. I know like right now, again, when there's 300 plus people in a lecture, I think it's weird. Like it would be weird to not be wearing a mask because you always hear people sniffling and coughing. And of course, the world is just like bred now to be paranoid. But in one of my classes now, like a girl got kicked out because she was taking a drink of water, and that meant like pulling down her mask. Like my professor will literally yell at people if he like sees their nose and stuff like that. You're not allowed to drink or eat, even if it's just to get a drink of water. Like you have to step out of the room if you're going to take off your mask. So it's going to be weird that it's not going to be required. But I wanted to hear what your thoughts were on that.
I think it's going to be really interesting walking into class that first day where you can or you can't. I mean, honestly, I don't really know if I'm going to wear a mask then or not. I kind of feel like being right after spring break, maybe I will. Only because, like you said, Marley, like so many people have just been traveling. So maybe for that first week, I'll kind of feel it out and see. But it was interesting. Like even yesterday in my discussion I was in, my TA, she was like, I want to make sure everyone feels comfortable with like the new news about having masks removed. And she even made a comment that she might have like people wearing masks sit on one side of the classroom and people not in masks sit on another.
Interesting.
I like that idea.
Thought it was kind of like weird, but I guess like if that makes people more comfortable, maybe. But I think it would definitely be for more of the people who obviously are still wearing a mask, because if you're not wearing a mask, like you're not going to be scared of the people with masks on. But so I don't know, that was just interesting. I think it's going to be really interesting to see who's going to be wearing one and who's not.
Totally.
But I'm kind of excited because sometimes wearing a mask, like after hiking up Bascom, when you have to like go in, like I have a class in Bascom, that like the actual building, and after hiking up the hill,
like for anybody that does not go here, some idiot decided to build this school on a freaking hill. Okay, like side note, I literally had an asthma attack climbing up this hill. The class that Lily and I have together is up that hill, and it's an 8:50 lecture twice a week, 8:50 in the morning. So imagine like us waking up. What time do we like? I wake up at like 7:45 for that class. I get up, I forgot to take my inhaler. Get up the hill. I'm sitting there next to Lily. I'm like, I can't be here. Like I can't. And then I had to leave, and she had to send me the notes. Sorry. But yeah, climbing up.
It's terrible. You walk up it. Like some days I usually dress like lighter on my days that I have lecture in Bascom because I don't want to be like sweating by the time I get to the top of the hill.
Every time we're in the class, we have to change our masks because they're wet from sweat. Climbing up the hill.
So now without the mask mandate, you just don't even have to shove a mask on your face after doing that, which that will be nice.
I never thought of that.
Yes, great definitely. Point. Also, Wisconsin is so flat, and like, of course, they built it on the one place there's a hill. Like, of course. But it's fine. It's fine. Like as much as Bascom Hill sucks having a mask on, when it's cold out, like my mask is like when you're skiing and you wear gaiters, like my mask is my gaiter when I'm walking. So it keeps my mouth warm, my nose warm. But yeah, like Marley was saying, I have to change my mask because it's like full with like, I don't know what's there, but it's not good. But I also haven't not worn a mask in
2
a very
years.
long time.
Yeah.
Like even when there was like they were stopping the mask mandate and all these things, like at home, my family was still pretty much wearing our
Mhm.
masks most places,
Mhm.
and
Same.
so I just really haven't experienced wearing no mask. So this will be a really big adjustment for me. I don't know. Like I feel like I'm still going to be bringing masks places just in case like a restaurant or something feels more comfortable with us wearing masks. I think it's like a personal preference basically for every place.
Also, yeah,
But
and something I just thought of, like, I know like a lot of people won't admit this, but I think in terms of what I'm gonna do, it's really like depending on what my friends do. And that's kind of just a thing, like
yeah,
Yeah.
subsiding, I don't know if that's the right use of that word, to like whatever, conforming to whatever everybody else is doing, like peer pressure wise. Like if my friends are wearing a mask, I will too. It just because all of our values and morals like closely align. So once we get a feel for what
Or
everyone else is doing, we will.
yeah,
yeah, and that's like the same even in class. Like with my TA who's like, if you're not gonna wear a mask, you'll sit on this side. Like if I'm gonna be the only person on that side, like I'm gonna wear a
Yeah.
mask, which doesn't bother me, but it's just like I think it's really gonna be who around you is doing it and kind of like you said, fitting in a sense.
Having had COVID, all of us really, do you guys feel like that's necessarily changed your risk tolerance or like what you're willing to do? I remember when I tested positive over break, I was very thankful. And I know that's like weird to say, but again, I was at home, I was with my family. I didn't have to worry about being sick at school because I was sick a lot for a semester. And I was excited to come back because you kind of feel like you're like invincible at that point. Like, oh, nope, just had it, even though, yes, you can get it again. And yes, there's different variants. I remember feeling like, oh, well, I'm triple vaxxed. Now I have even more antibodies. Like, nothing can stop me. I'm not going to get it. I'm not worried. So I wanted to hear if you guys have had similar experiences having those fresh antibodies.
yes. Well, before I had COVID, I was known as like the person who was horrified of it. Like anyone who had COVID, I was freaking out. I did not want to get near them. And especially because in first semester, you go home relatively often. Like every time COVID was spiking up was when we were going home. And I wanted to see my family and especially my grandparents. So I was really scared of it. I kept my windows open when it was winter
Mm-hmm.
time, when I thought my suite mates possibly had it, which they ended up having it, but they didn't test. So I would have like gotten it and bring it home. So I was horrified. And then once I got it, once just like Marley, it was a big sigh of relief because there was no chance I was seeing my family anytime soon since I just got back to campus. And it was just nice. And then I realized after I was done COVID, I like wasn't being as cautious around others. Like I just seemed to be a lot more calm and relaxed, which was so nice because I've always been constantly stressed with other people. I didn't want to share food. I'd like if like we were sharing a drink or food, like I would always like wipe off whatever like straw just
Mm-hmm.
so like I felt more comfortable. But now I probably am gonna get a regular sickness because of how calm I am. That's not COVID, but it's been a lot better and I feel a lot safer. Even though you still have the possibility of getting another strain, it's a big sigh of relief.
Totally.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it definitely obviously getting COVID's not fun and it isn't a terrible situation to be in, but I think I'm really thankful that obviously I didn't get very sick with it and after I was able to feel fine and recover back to normal. And now like coming back to school, I did feel a lot better about hanging out with people and going out and you don't have to be worried like, oh, does someone in this room have COVID and am I going to get it? Because I mean like if you like the truth is like someone you're around probably, especially those first couple weeks we came back to school, like did have COVID
Mm-hmm.
because everyone seemed to be getting it. But I wouldn't say I'm like thankful I got COVID because I feel like I could have lived without spending those 8 days in my basement and like the guilt of like spreading it to other people and everything. But I think it is nice to like have gotten it over with. And now for the semester, like I feel pretty safe, even though I know like I did have COVID already a few months ago. So starting to wear off those antibodies. But for now, at least, it does feel like
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great way to just tie everything together from this episode. And I believe that's all the time we have for today. So, Jess and Lily, I seriously cannot thank you guys enough for joining me this week again and for being such incredible and wise podcast guests. And to everybody else hearing this, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Spill the Soup. Before we go, please make sure to show some love for the podcast by subscribing and rating 5 stars to whatever platform you're listening on and wherever else you get your podcasts. We will see you 2 weeks from now for our next episode, so stay tuned until then. Spill the Soup is part of the Jewfolk Podcast Network. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. For more information, go to tcjewfolk.com/podcast or email the show and others at podcast@tcjewfolk.com. Thanks for listening.